What is up, Lighthouse Middle School? How you guys doing? You guys having a fantastic Wednesday. I'm glad you're at your home group right now. Just a couple of quick things before our lesson. First up, we are almost into what we in church call Holy Week. This is where we set aside some time to celebrate and remember the last week of Jesus' life, which we're going to be talking about a lot in our lesson. So we got some key like celebrations for that coming up. So this Sunday is Palm Sunday, which has got an Easter egg hunt that'll be happening for elementary aged kids and families after church. So I'm sure there's ways to help out. You can reach out to myself or Amy if you want to help out with that. And then next week we have a service on Friday called Good Friday, focused on the crucifixion, which is actually what we'll be talking about tonight. So that's at 6:30. That's Friday night, 6:30, April 18th. And I know it's like maybe feels a little odd to consider coming to a service, like a church service on like a weeknight, um, like during the week. It's not like a Wednesday or whatever. But man, I'd really encourage you to consider coming to this service. It is really somber, um, but it is also, it really helps us to focus on what Jesus went through. And I think that's good for us to focus on. So that when we get to Easter Sunday, which is the next one on Sunday, the celebration and the joy and the new life of that event is even sweeter. So definitely consider coming to Good Friday and then also Easter Sunday, April 20th. We're just doing one service this year. Other years we've done two services, just one service. But we are going to celebrate the resurrection. It's going to be awesome. I would love to see you at all three of these services that we have coming up in the next week or so. For middle school, we have got Splash Bash coming up. So this is our end of the year or end of the school year party where we get a little wet, we get a little messy, we play some games. It is a lot of fun. And it is a celebration of all that we've done together in youth group this year. So you're going to want to wear clothes that you don't mind getting dirty, shoes you don't mind getting wet and dirty, and you'll want to bring a towel so that when you drive home, you're not getting your parents' car all gross. So Splash Bash, April 30th. I'm looking forward to it. And then finally, you can scan this QR code. You guys know what it's going to do. It's going to take you to a devotional where you can continue learning about what we're talking about in youth group this month. I really encourage you to do it. We're talking about Jesus. We're talking about Easter, talking about the crucifixion, talking about the resurrection. It's really important stuff for what it means to be a Christian. So I would encourage you to get into God's Word to see what it says about all of those things. So with that being said, we're going to hop into our lesson for the night. So welcome back to Invited. Like I said, we're exploring what a party the Easter story is. We've got a lot yet to come. And when you're at a party, you are most likely going to meet new people. And some party tricks could maybe help you break the ice. You learn how to fold a dollar into a t-shirt, or you can balance a can of soda on its edge. But of course, not all party tricks are created equally. We're going to take a quick poll to kind of figure out what we think the best trick might be. So, would you rather make the best shadow puppets or know how to make a flute out of a carrot? Which of those party tricks would you prefer to have? 1 for the first one, 2 for the second one. I think I'd prefer to make shadow puppets. So I'm going to go number 1. Okay, next one, number 2 here. Would you rather know how to break an apple in half with your hands or know how to tear a phone book in half with your hands? So we're ripping something in half here for a party trick. Would you prefer that to be an apple or would you prefer it to be a phone book? I think I'm going to go number 2 on this one. I think ripping a phone book in half would be quite impressive. Next one, would you rather be able to sound like a cricket or sound like a cat? So for a party trick, which of those would you prefer? I don't really like the sound of crickets chirping all that much, so I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to sound exactly like a cat. And then final one for our party trick here. Would you rather be able to guess any smell or guess any sound accurately? Guess any smell or guess any sound accurately. I think I'm going to go number 1, maybe. I'd rather be able to guess any smell. I think that would be a little more interesting. So, all of those party tricks would be pretty memorable, I think, right? And we often go through life wondering if anyone really knows us or if anyone sees us as we are. We fear being overlooked or left out and desire relationships to celebrate who we are and what we can do. We want it so badly we're even willing to choose between maybe 2 not so great options if we have to, because we all want to be celebrated. And there's an incredible scene at the end of Star Wars Return of the Jedi. Spoilers coming up, but this movie's been out for forever, so if you haven't seen it, sorry, maybe just plug your ears. At the end of Return of the Jedi, people celebrated the defeat of Darth Vader and the Emperor, and the Galactic Empire crumbled. People were excited, so they threw a massive party, and it spanned the whole galaxy. Check it out. Can you imagine what all of those celebrators were feeling? They were forced to live under the Empire's power. There was rampant abuse of power, which led to immense fear throughout the galaxy. People were moved from their homeland, products were scarce, and the Empire wanted to crush any semblance of resistance to their rule. And we know eventually a group of brave rebels rose and battled against the Empire. They pushed past their fears to tap into the power of the Force and overcame great dangers. When victory arrived, everyone understood the power of their bravery. And every year we have a worldwide celebration of Jesus' defeat over death. We call it Easter Sunday. We exchange candy, dye hard-boiled eggs, and swing pastel baskets full of fake grass, which is actually like maybe a little weird when you think about it, but that's okay. Because underneath that strangeness, there's a chance for us to remember the incredible bravery and power Jesus showed at Calvary. He stepped up to conquer sin and death because he was the only one who could, and he changed the lives of all who had trusted him. Easter is our chance to join multiple cultures and generations in a massive party to celebrate what he accomplished. And during the week leading up to Easter, which we call Holy Week, we focus on the final days of Jesus' life. We see snapshots of Jesus wrapping up his ministry on earth. He knew what was about to happen, but the disciples around him were stunned. And when Jesus entered Jerusalem on this week, he's treated like royalty. We celebrate this on Palm Sunday. The people of Jerusalem threw a big homecoming celebration, typically reserved for conquering kings. Unfortunately, the people's loyalties turned, and Jesus would end up in a wildly unjust situation. Jesus' disciple, Judas, betrayed him, which led to his arrest and transfer to the most powerful political leader in the area. His name is Pontius Pilate. So, Luke 23, verses 13 through 25. This is on page 658. Pilate called together the leading priests and other religious leaders along with the people, and he announced his verdict. You brought this man to me, accusing him of leading a revolt. I've examined him thoroughly on this point in your presence and found him innocent. Herod came to the same conclusion and sent him back to us. Nothing this man has done calls for the death penalty. So I'll have him flogged, and then I'll release him. And a mighty roar rose from the crowd, and with one voice they shouted, Kill him, and release Barabbas to us. Now Barabbas was in prison for taking part in an insurrection in Jerusalem against the government and for murder. Pilate argued with them because he wanted to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, Crucify him! Crucify him! For the third time, he demanded, Why? What crime has he committed? I found no reason to sentence him to death. I'll have him flogged, and then I'll release him. The mob shouted louder and louder, demanding that Jesus be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate sentenced Jesus to die as they demanded. As they had requested, he released Barabbas, the man in prison for insurrection and murder, but he turned Jesus over to them to do as they wished. Pilate found that Jesus did nothing wrong. The crowd turned on Jesus. They wanted him to face the most severe punishment a person could face: death by crucifixion. This entailed having your wrists and feet nailed to a wooden cross until they died. Usually they died from suffocation because they couldn't breathe, and they suffered for a long time. And this was a common way to carry out the death penalty at this time, but it's one of the most awful, painful ways to die. And of course, Jesus wasn't a criminal. The crowd convinced Pilate to send Jesus to be crucified. He was innocent, but willingly let the guards lead him to the cross. Jesus didn't seek vengeance, even when he was dying on the cross. Instead, he continued his legacy of love and forgiveness. Continuing in Luke 23, starting in verse 33, read till small number 43. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched, and the leaders scoffed. "He saved others," they said. "Let him save himself. He's really God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these words, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself, and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." Jesus forgave the people hurting him. They mocked and embarrassed him, but he still forgave them. When a criminal next to him recognized who he was, Jesus sent an invitation to join him in paradise after they died. A few guards expected Jesus to perform a miracle to save himself, but he didn't do that. Jesus called out to God one last time, and ultimately died. One Roman soldier spoke up about Jesus' innocence, and he understood that this whole execution was wrong. One more passage from Luke 23, 44 through 47. By this time it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. And Jesus shouted, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And with those words, he breathed his last. When the Roman officer overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshipped God and said, "Surely this man was innocent." You can think of these scenes as a grid of photos from a photo booth. There's a trial, an image of Jesus on the cross, and then a tomb. These are intense images depicting a horrific scene. You'd probably be a little concerned if you went to a party and people shared photos of those moments. But every picture tells a story. Individually, these pictures might seem heavy and uncomfortable, but when we look at them together, we see God's presence in all of it. And hundreds of years before Jesus walked the earth, God spoke through a prophet named Isaiah. God told Isaiah about someone who would show up on earth and restore God's people. This person would do incredible things on God's behalf. The description given to Isaiah is similar to what eventually happens in Jesus' story. So moving back in the Bible, going to page 439, or 459, sorry. Isaiah 53, starting in verse 4, going to verse 9. Yet it was our weaknesses that he carried, and it was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, punishment for his own sins, but he was pierced for our rebellion and crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's path to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep is silent before the shears, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants and that his life was cut short in midstream, but he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong, and he had never deceived anyone. He was buried like a criminal, and he was put in a rich man's grave. These similarities exist because the person being described by Isaiah is Jesus, which is amazing that this was God's plan all along, and he had Isaiah speak about it hundreds of years before it actually happened. Today, we recognize that Jesus sacrificed his life to save the world. Jesus didn't fight back when he was on the cross. He didn't call down fire from the sky or invite a host of angels to lift him off the cross. Instead, in humility, Jesus accepted what was happening and trusted God to have a bigger, better story to tell. There's a distance between us and God, and Jesus came to show the distance that had separated us from God didn't have to any longer. Jesus demonstrated that evil, especially the evil in us, didn't have to keep us away from God, and then showed us the lengths he would go to make sure we never lost sight of this great love again. If we ever feel separated, we remember what Jesus did on the cross, demonstrating who God is, love. If we believe in this love, put our faith in Jesus, our lives will be changed. It can change how you see yourself, change how you see others. When we accept his sacrificial love, we're free from guilt, shame, and fear. And Jesus died on the cross to rescue us, you and me. So we will no longer be separated from God by evil and death. At Easter time, we're invited to remember what Jesus has done. We may have heard about the Easter story, but I encourage you to dive deeper into what this story means for you personally. We're invited to remember what Jesus has done and celebrate how he changed everything for us. Here are a few ways to keep Jesus' love and sacrifice. Remember that Jesus did what we couldn't do. Jesus came into the world, healed people, gave them hope, ultimately paved a new path for us. And this is one of the defining moments of Jesus' life, his choice to die on the cross and open a new way for people to be with God. None of us can do that for ourselves. Trust that Jesus' sacrifice is enough and did what we never could do. And take a few moments to thank Jesus for how he is transforming your life in ways that only God can do. Remember that you can forgive others. Jesus' life shows us how often God forgives us. In the same way, we're invited to offer forgiveness and grace to others. We can forgive and still maintain boundaries, including taking time to heal from some of our hurts. But we want to support one another as we take steps towards forgiveness. This week, ask God what forgiving someone who hurt you would look like. And then finally, remember that you're loved more than you can ever imagine. Through these stories of Jesus, we see how much God loves and cares for us. It can be hard to know and accept love from others because our love is only a reflection of God's perfect love. Consider what it means to be so loved this week that Jesus would die for you. Nothing can separate you from God's love. Take time this week to write down a few ways that maybe your life would look a little different if you fully trusted in God's love for you. Today, if you haven't already, you have a chance to accept this love and victory over sin and death for yourself. Jesus experienced and accomplished more than any of us could do on our own. And in his sacrificial death, remember that Jesus changed everything. We're invited to remember what Jesus has done. We're going to switch it over to our small group discussion now. Love you guys. I'll see you when I see you.